Good morning again. Good to see everybody this morning. We are glad that you are here. It looks like the Terry family's back with us again this week. We're blessed by their presence. Thank you guys for sharing your time with us. We do appreciate that. Looks like we've got a few that have gone home sick or stayed home sick that are with us this morning. We're glad you're here. My wife switched from day shift to night shift, so hopefully she's home sleeping now. So that's what I'm praying for anyway, that she's able to sleep right now. What do you get when you cross a vampire and a snowman? What do you get when you cross a vampire and a snowman? Frostbite. Thank you, Fozzie Bear. Waka, waka, waka. A Muppets reference this close to Christmas is almost unavoidable. One of my favorite movies, and one of my wife's favorite movies, is A Muppet Christmas Carol. And if you're familiar with that, Michael Caine plays Ebenezer Scrooge, and the Muppets play various characters in through there. And the narrator is Gonzo and his buddy Rizzo the Rat, and they play all kinds of jacks of all trades throughout London. In one particular sequence, they're lamplighters, and Rizzo's trying to light the flame, and Gonzo lights his tail. And he says, "Light the lamp, not the rat! Light the lamp, not the rat!" And he runs off into the snow. And anyway, that was one of my favorite all-time scenes from a movie. I laugh every time I see it. I can't almost snort when I see it. And it hurts to laugh. I laugh so hard. We have to pause the movie at that point to catch our breath. As a child of the 60s, growing up in the early 70s, I got to see the Muppets on Sesame Street just about every day growing up. And then, of course, they franchised that into movies and videos and all kinds of other things. And recently, CeeLo Green, a pop musician of pretty good stature as of late, did a video with them called All I Need Is Love. And all the Muppets are there: Kermit and Miss Piggy, Fozzie Bear, Gonzo, Animal, everybody's there in the movie, in the video, and they sing a song called All I Need Is Love. And there's all this Christmas action going on in the background, and the lyrics are talking about getting 70-inch wide televisions and getting watches and rings and cars and houses and all this other stuff. And the crux of it is, and when they get to the chorus, it's all I need is love. And it's really a love song. They're talking, CeeLo Green is talking to the person that he loves, and the Muppets are singing to the person that they love. All we need is love. I think that was a Beatles song from years ago. All we need is love. All you need is love. And I'm quite sure that the Muppets didn't set out to make this grand theological statement when they teamed up with CeeLo Green, but they made one. All you need is love. Today, as we celebrate the second Sunday of our Advent journey of God with us, we're celebrating love. When Jesus came into our world as a baby, he was the human embodiment of the gift of God's love. When he came as Emmanuel, when he came as God with us, he came as God incarnate. He came as love incarnate. If you weren't with us last week, or if Advent is unfamiliar to you, let me briefly explain our journey toward Christmas. The word Advent means a coming or arrival. And the season is marked by expectation, by waiting, by anticipation, by longing. Advent is not just an extension of Christmas. It's a season that links the past and the present and the future all together. Advent offers us the opportunity to share in the ancient longing for the coming of the Messiah. It gives us an opportunity to celebrate his birth. It gives us an opportunity to celebrate in the here and now the gifts that we receive from God our Father. And it gives us an opportunity to long for the second coming of Christ. Advent looks back in celebration at the hope fulfilled in Jesus Christ's coming. At the same time, it looks forward in hopeful and eager anticipation to the second coming of Christ and us being ushered into his kingdom. During Advent, we wait for both. And our hope, it's active, it's assured. We talked about hope last week. Hope being that great gift from God. And godly hope is a hope that knows, it's confident knowing that we're going to receive what we've been promised. Each week we're going to focus on a different one. Last week was hope. This week is love. Next week, Lord willing, will be joy. And the week after that will be peace. And so when you talk about love, one of the things that comes to my mind is, man, there are just a lot of great love stories, aren't there? How many songs and books and poems and all this other stuff have been written about love? Well, when you stop to think about the all-time great love stories, what comes to mind? What's the first one that comes into your mind? Romeo and Juliet. Love story. Tragedy. What about Mark Antony and Cleopatra? Love story. Ends in tragedy. Well, how about something closer to the Bible? Samson and Delilah. Love story. Ends in tragedy. Doesn't end well, does it? Yeah. Why is it that all these love stories that we're enamored by end in tragedy? One of the greatest love stories has been right in front of us the whole time. It's a love story that's written about, and yet it's not written about. It's a love story between Mary and Joseph. And you think, Mary and Joseph? Really? A love story? Yes, really. A love story. Now, the Bible has a few love stories. And so imagine with me, if you will, a place in the ancient dusty days of Israel under the Roman Empire. A small village called Nazareth lives a carpenter named Joseph. Now, before I go any further, I want to let you know that when I look at God's Word, a lot of what I'm getting ready to share with you is not found there. It's not written down for us. So when I say it's a great love story that's written about, we know about Mary and Joseph. But it's not written about. We don't know the details. And so we're left to wonder and use our imagination and use the context of the day, the history, historical context of how things were like. And so a lot of what I'm getting ready to share with you, you're not going to find it anywhere here in God's written word. It won't be there. But it exists in my mind. And when I stop to think about these two people that God chose to care for His only begotten Son, I have to imagine that somewhere in their life they exhibited God's love towards their family, towards one another. And so when I think about love, and I think about this romantic love, I think about this love story that existed between Mary and Joseph, because God's not just going to send His Son to anybody. He's not going to say, you know what? There's old Dave. He's a pretty good fella. He's all right. I'm just going to send him the greatest thing ever in Jesus Christ. I'm going to send him my son to care for him. Oh, wait a minute. Old Dave kind of messed up. No, He sends him to Mary and to Joseph. Two young people. So imagine, if you will, that little town of Nazareth. A young carpenter named Joseph. He's of noble ancestry. He's from the line of David. He's from a kingly line, but yet here he is, a humble man, making a humble living, working with his hands as a tradesman. He probably learned to build things from his father, who probably learned to build things from his father, who probably learned to build things from his father. Some scholars would say that Joseph grew up in Bethlehem. We're not certain. And at some point he moved to Nazareth, about 70 miles north as the crow flies. Maybe this was so he could build his own carpentry business. Maybe this was because there were relatives there that he needed to go tend to or be a part of. Maybe it was just because Nazareth needed a good carpenter. We're not told. We don't know for certain, but we can speculate that Joseph had probably been working long enough in Nazareth to establish himself as an honorable man. A man who treated his customers fairly. A man who was a successful craftsman, carpenter. And that would have made him, in that society, an eligible bachelor. I think that would probably make him an eligible bachelor in any society. A young man who's willing to work hard and owns his own business, that deals well with the public. If I had a daughter, I'd certainly want her to look for a man like that. The younger girls of the village, or more likely their fathers, were keeping an eye on Joseph. They knew who he was. They knew what he was about. They knew that in business he treated people fairly. And you have to remember that in the Jewish marriage custom, they're different than what we do today. They're different than sometimes even within the Jewish community still today. It was a lot different. You had things kind of backwards. They would make a contract with a man and a woman to be married. And that was called the ketubah. And it was a legal piece of paper that was written down. And the father of the young girl and the bridegroom would come together and they would agree on a price, a dowry, if you will. And then they would agree on a time. At a certain time, you're married right now. This paperwork right here says you're married. But you're going to have to wait for a certain amount of time. Possibly to gather enough money and funds to pay for that. And they called that particular time their dating period. You had to get married in order to date somebody. I think my wife and I tried to do that. We got married very quickly and then started dating after we were married. Perhaps I'm a Jewish person at heart. I don't know. They would get to know each other. After the contract was signed, they would spend a year, sometimes years, depending on the contract, and they would date, and they would get to know each other, and they would have dinners together, and they would go to the movies, as it were. Spend time together, get to know each other. And then on a certain day, the day agreed upon date, the bridegroom with all of his friends would rush to the girl's house. And he would take the girl by the hand and go into the house. They would consummate the marriage while everybody was in and around the house and outside. And they would come out and have a celebration. That does not sound very romantic, does it? Let's be truthful about that. That does not sound romantic at all. It doesn't sound like it has a whole lot to do with love. It sounds like it's just a corporate checklist. Well, I got the ketubah here. All right, and we did our dating, and we now consummated it, and now we're going to the celebration. Woohoo! Touchdown, we're good to go. Very different from what we're accustomed to. Sounds a little awkward, unromantic. And maybe it was. But maybe it wasn't. Maybe for them it was part of their great love story. At least that's what they were thinking. The Bible doesn't fill in a lot of details, but Mary and Joseph, two young people in love. Mary was certainly younger than Joseph. Tradition suggests she was probably a young teenager, and in that day, that was marrying age. And it's possible that in their small town that Mary knew Joseph. He was still fairly young, rugged, strong. Certainly his forearms would be chiseled, and his hands were rough. They were certain. And from the little bits we're told about him in the Bible, he was probably an even-keeled, confident, and kind man. For his part, Joseph would have known the young girls in the village. Their fathers were his customers. He would have built furniture for their homes, a table here, a chair there. He would have repaired the wheels for their ox carts. He would have built shovels. He would have built hoes and things like that for their gardens. And he listened as they talked about their families. And he knew within his community who was kind and who was fair. And who treated their families with respect. And who was godly. And who was not. Maybe, there were several local girls or families that kept their eyes on Joseph. That's the guy I want for my daughter. Maybe they knew each other. Maybe it was something like this. When Joseph was talking to his friends, have you noticed that young girl, Mary? Man, her eyes sparkle like the sun on the Sea of Galilee. And maybe Mary, when she was talking with her girlfriend, said, you know what, I saw Joseph playing with some kids the other day outside of his shop, and when he laughed, it sounded like music filled the air. Eventually, they were married, bound to each other for life, with their hearts stirring and their future uncertain. Like the rest of us, they could have no way of knowing what they would truly face together. But excitement must have filled them as they signed the paperwork. Nervousness. What are we getting into? Just exactly who it is. Who is it that I'm marrying? And that's what the dating period was for, to get to know your husband, to get to know your wife. Joseph may have carved a small wooden gift for his new wife, maybe a flower. It says, it's nowhere as beautiful as you, but this is as meager effort as I can put forth. Or maybe he carved her a box with a metal clasp on it that she could keep near to her heart. Mary was that kind of person, who treasured things up in her heart. Maybe Joseph knew that. Mary might have liked to watch Joseph work, go down to the shop and watch him with the hammers and the chisels and the saws, taking what was broken and mending it, putting it back together, or taking something that she couldn't see and making a table or a chair or an ox cart or a plowshare or whatever out of it. And he certainly would have enjoyed time with Mary's family. Maybe she baked for him. Maybe he liked a certain type of cake or a certain type of something, and she would bake that especially for him and bring it to him at work while he was taking his lunch break. They would spend time with her family. He would have gotten to know them. They would have gotten to know him. And with each day that passed, the young couple learned more and more about each other. What made Mary laugh? What Joseph's challenges were through the day. The strengths of their personalities, the imperfections of their personalities. I love Mary, but she squeezes the toothpaste from the middle. I love Joseph, but he doesn't hang his shirt up when he comes into the house. He doesn't put his shoes in the proper box. But they shared each thing. They shared their fears. They shared their dreams. They shared their expectations. They talked about how many kids they would have. What type of house Joseph would be able to build and provide for Mary and their children. And each day that passed, Mary and Joseph chose love. A love that continued to deepen. A love that continued to grow. Such were the traditions of the Jewish people. Such were the traditions of Mary and Joseph. And so those things that are not written about, that's what it looked like for them. So imagine the emotional bombshell that went off when Joseph heard the news. How could you, Mary? How could you do this to me? How could you do this to us? How could you do this to your family? More importantly, how could you do this to God? I thought you loved me the way that I love you. We were doing this the right way. We were honoring God. We were honoring our families. We were honoring each other. And now this? If you have ever experienced the betrayal of adultery or infidelity, perhaps you've been close to someone who has, you know the devastation of betrayal. The wound that it causes the heart, the soul, feels like someone has taken a bomb and detonated it inside your chest. There's a trust that's broken that sometimes is never repaired. And that was the broken trust that Joseph would have felt when Mary came and told him the news. Joseph, look, I know this sounds crazy, but an angel visited me and told me I'm going to have a baby. I know that's crazy, isn't it? And the angel said his name was going to be Jesus. Say, what? His name's going to be what? Yeah, his name's going to be Jesus. His name's going to be Yeshua. His name's going to be God Save Us, or God Saves. And he's going to be great. He's going to be called the Son of the Most High. He's the Messiah, Joseph. The angel told me he's the Messiah. You have to believe me. It's a miracle. It's a miracle. It's true because I'm pregnant. Now, you and I know, as did every Hebrew person of that day, there's only one way to get pregnant. And Joseph knew that he hadn't gone that way. And he had trusted that Mary hadn't gone that way. I can imagine that it was only too much for Joseph. Maybe he tried to listen to those first words. Maybe he did hear the word angel, the miracle, the Messiah. But I'm sure that when he heard the word pregnant, it all came crashing down. Maybe he walked away in silence, broken and speechless. Maybe he yelled and screamed and shouted at the top of his lungs and sent Mary away in tears. Either way, things didn't go smoothly. And maybe this is part of the reason why Mary went to visit her cousin Elizabeth. To give her parents an opportunity to figure out what's going on. This is a great story, Mary. This is awesome. And if it's true, this is going to be incredible. This is what we've been longing for. This is the hope and the love that we've been waiting for. But you know what? Things are a little hot right now. So we're going to send you away to see your cousin Elizabeth. It may have been a good thing for Joseph as well. When you're standing in the middle of the fire, it's real easy to get burned. And so maybe it gave him an opportunity to cool off as well. So they parted. Probably a lot of pain, probably a lot of anger, probably a lot of distrust. And there's young Mary. Woman by her cultural definitions, young girl by ours. Going to see her cousin. We're not told if she went alone or if she had an escort to go with her. Can you imagine each step of that long, lonely walk? The walk of shame, as it were. And with each pounding of her footstep, she clung to that hope that we talked about last week. What the angel said was true. She clung to the hope that the kindness that was found in Joseph's heart might come back to the forefront. And as she walked, and as she prayed, and as she talked, and as she cried, she came to her cousin's house. And if you're watching a movie of Mary and Joseph's love story, at this point, things start to pan out, and you see the dusty roads of their country, and then you see their country, and then you see the planet, and then you keep backing up and backing up and backing up out into the universe. I'm going to back up over these plants and knock something down. Still farther beyond the solar system, beyond the Milky Way galaxy, somehow wider still through the limits of the universe of space and light and time, until finally somewhere beyond the limits of physics that bind our creation, there is only a presence. A supernatural, infinite presence that is love. There's only God, somehow over and within all things and present and moving within all time. There is God. The Apostle John would write about God. He says, "So we have come to know and to believe the love that God has for us. God is love, and whoever abides in love abides in God, and God abides in him." 1 John chapter 4, verse 16. This is the nature of our God. Love in its purest and most holy form. Agape. That love that is self-sacrificing, that puts others above itself. And love is there at the center of God's creative forces. His love is what created the universe. His love is what formed the people. His love is what made them. He built them into His image. His love is what swelled up inside of Him, His desire to have that relationship with them, because He loved His creation. He loved mankind. Still does. Love was there even when the world fell into sin and rebellion. And despite the catastrophic consequences of humanity's fall, love was there in shepherding Adam and Eve and their family into this altered world. Even then, love was making a way to restore all that had been lost. Love forged a covenant with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. And love continually led the Israelites through the relocation and resettlement, through triumph and imprisonment and exile. As we trace throughout the Old Testament, love guided and corrected and exhorted and showed mercy to the ever disobedient and easily distracted Israelites. And I'm going to put my name in there among that. In Mary and Joseph's story, love was going to be taking the form of humanity in the Messiah Jesus. Love is, after all, what we've been talking about this morning, God with us, Emmanuel. And love would be with Mary and Joseph to care for them and provide everything that they would need. And a test of any good love story is this: is love enough? Is this love strong enough or deep enough or true enough to handle X, Y, or Z? Whatever may come your way. From the trivial and the annoying to the catastrophic and potentially crushing. I'm here to tell you this morning, if your love is a godly love, then yes, it is. Godly love is enough to overcome anything. If that weren't true, His love towards us wouldn't be enough to overcome our sin. Mary's journey to her cousin Elizabeth's house, again, wasn't easy. The walk would have been long and hot, been lonely. She would have been left alone with her thoughts. Confused, hurt, perhaps in despair, and yet clinging to that hope of what the angel said. Elizabeth had an opportunity here to condemn her cousin. You brought shame to our family, and you bring that to my house? To that I say no. You're not even allowed to sleep on the porch. You're not even allowed to sleep out in the barn with the animals. No, why don't you go back to where you came from, you little ugly word. But Elizabeth didn't greet her that way. Elizabeth said, "Blessed are you among women, and blessed is the child you bear. But why am I so favored that the mother of my Lord should come to me? As soon as the sound of your greeting reached my ears, the baby in my womb leaped for joy. Blessed is she who has believed that the Lord would fulfill His promises to her." Remember, Elizabeth has a miracle baby of her own. Anybody ever been around a pregnant lady when the baby kicks? That's amazing, isn't it? It's just truly amazing. And from the moment that Mary cried out, "Elizabeth, it's me, I'm here," who we would call John starts kicking. He's excited. His Savior is just a few feet away. And in the womb, he knew that. And so Mary offers love instead of judgment. In Mary's response, she sang what we sang earlier this morning, the Magnificat. "My soul magnifies the Lord, glorifies the Lord, and my spirit rejoices in God my Savior, for He has been mindful of the humble state of His servant." And in all of her hoping on the way up there, Elizabeth just reinforced that hope, that who you carry in you is a miracle of God. It's a miracle from God. You are not bringing shame to our family. You are bringing hope. You are bringing love to the world. In the midst of Mary's human crisis, God provided just the love she needed. And that's how God works. I've noticed. Sometimes He brings people into my life to help me in that category, and sometimes He puts me into other people's lives to help them with a category or two. And that's what we do as a body of Christ, as a church family. Where I am lacking, you come help that out. Where you are lacking, I come and help that out. And through all of it, we show love and grace and honor toward one another. because our God has shown us love and grace and honor. In Joseph's case, he needed something a little bit different. Back in Nazareth, in his pain and confusion, Joseph decided he was going to divorce Mary. He was going to put her away quietly. There was a provision within their law that allowed him to do that and keep it out of the newspapers, the tabloids, as it were. And it would keep Mary from being stoned to death. Joseph, in all of that hurt and anguish and confusion, still showed Mary love. And Joseph too needed God's reassurance, and so God sent an angel to him in his dream, and he said to him over in Matthew, "Joseph, son of David, do not be afraid to take Mary home with you as your wife. Because what is conceived in her is from the Holy Spirit. She will give birth to a son, and you are to give him the name Yeshua, because he will save his people from their sins." Matthew chapter 1, verses 20 and 21. Joseph needed reassurance. Look at what the angel first says. Do not be afraid to take Mary home. Joseph had a great fear. I don't know what that fear was. I can only imagine that his fear was, man, everybody in town is going to mock me. Everybody in town is going to mock Mary. Everybody in town is going to slander her name. Everybody in town is going to do this, and I'm afraid that if I bring her home, can I rebuild this love and this trust that I have with her? Am I going to be able to overcome what I perceive to be this great, perhaps unforgivable sin? Will I be able to love her the way I loved her before? Will I be able to love this child the way that I want to, as if he were my own? And the angel says, put that fear away, Joseph. Don't be afraid to take her home, because what's inside of her is truly from God. I am persuaded that in that moment, and before that moment, that God chose Joseph precisely because of the way he would react. Precisely because he would be the kind of father that he wanted his earthly, when Jesus came to earth, that he wanted him to have, who was kind and compassionate and could show love, and who wanted to do things discreetly and not make a big pomp and circumstance. And if he was going to hurt, and if he was going to be in pain, he was going to keep that hidden and keep it to himself. He wasn't going to make a big show of it. Even keeled, we said earlier, confident, kind. God gave Joseph the reassurance he needed to trust Mary and her love. He gave him the reassurance to ultimately trust God and God's love to make a way in their amazing, unbelievable, dangerous, supernatural, and ultimately triumphant love story. We talked about all those other stories ending in tragedy. This one does not end in tragedy. Oh yes, Jesus dies on the cross, and that is tragic. But for us, it's an opportunity to rejoice. It is an ultimate happy ending. It goes beyond any kind of fairy tale happy ending. That Jesus died on a cross for us, showing us his love, that he was willing to lay down his own life to buy us back, to redeem us, what we talked about a few weeks ago. Our story, his story, the God story, God with us, does not end in tragedy. It ends in celebration. The way any marriage should. A celebration. A time to celebrate. A time to rejoice. A time to be happy. A time to reflect on all that we've been given and all that we have. And so there is Joseph and Mary. An incredible love story. A love story that some 2,000 years later we truly benefit from. It wasn't their love for each other that got them through that. It was their love for God and their love of God that pulled them through that. It was the hope that God would be there with them every step of the way. It was the love that God had shown them in their life that they poured back out to God, that they poured back out to each other, that they poured into this infant, helpless infant, Jesus. It was a love that would walk countless miles while she was pregnant. It was a love that would spend the night in a barn because there was no place in the hotel for them. It was a love that would endure having your son born in the midst of animal dung in a barn. It was a love that would endure all the sneers and the smirks and the, oh yeah, well he better be the Son of God. It was a love that would endure shepherds coming telling them, you're not going to believe this incredible thing that we saw in this field tonight. The heavens opened up and the angels sang. And there's Mary and Joseph going, oh yeah. No, I believe you. It's a love that would help them to see wise men, kings in their own right, come and kneel and give gifts to the king and say, this is the King of Kings, your son. It's a love that would endure spending time at the temple with Anna and Simeon and them prophesying that this indeed was the Messiah. It was a love that would bind them together to endure watching a precocious 12, 13-year-old young man stay behind at the temple when he should have been with his family. It's the kind of love that would endure Joseph's possible death. I'm persuaded Joseph would have been nowhere else but beside his wife's side when their son was on the cross, if he were anything but dead. It's the kind of love that would endure watching your son be sacrificed, watching his blood flow, and watching his spirit be taken away. I can only imagine the conversations that Joseph and Mary had, the laughter that rang through their house, the winks and the nods from across the room, the holding each other tight in the middle of the night when children are teething, tending to sick children with colds and sniffles, brushing away the dirt from a skint knee. I can only imagine what that love story looked like on a day-to-day basis. I base it partially on the love story that I have with my wife. And has it been a perfect love story? No. But it's a love story all the same. In this Advent season, this season of hope, this season of longing, this season of expectation, I hope that we expect love. And my hope, as we've talked about, is reassured. I'm confident in knowing that I'm going to receive love. I am going to receive God's love. And as the Jewish person in that time, as they're waiting for this, they are waiting for God to make himself known. They're waiting. They are hoping. They are longing. They are desiring that love. And there it is. And we, some 2,000 years on this side of it, we desire, we long, and we wait for his coming. And we get a glimpse of his love in our everyday life with our spouses, with our sons and daughters, with our moms and dads, with all of our family members, with our extended church family, both here and on the Zoom. We get a small glimpse of God's love. And one day, we'll get to see that love face to face. John writes this: "A new command I give you, love one another as I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. In this season where we are hustling and bustling and doing everything we can to look like Santa Claus, I encourage each and every one of you to look like Jesus, to look like his disciple, to show his love to your neighbors who sometimes call you ugly names, who have no desire to hear the good news about who Jesus Christ is. I encourage you to love those who come to work who are sick and wind up being tested positive for COVID and may limit and inhibit some of the things that you'd like to do. I encourage you to love your sons and daughters who, for the life of you, you can't figure out why in the world they're doing what they're doing. Because I can almost guarantee you that some 30 years ago, my mom was looking at me going, what is he doing? And she loved me with a godly love. This season, let's look more like Jesus and his love. I want to leave you with this. Paul's words from Ephesians chapter 3, verses 17 through 19. And I pray that you, being rooted and established in love, may have power, together with all the Lord's holy people, to grasp how wide and how high and how deep is the love of Christ. And to know that this love surpasses knowledge, so that you may be filled to the measure of all the fullness of God. This Advent season, may God's love go with you. May his peace go with you as well. I believe Mike may have a song prepared for us. We're going to stand and sing that song. Until we meet again, may God's peace and his grace and his mercy and his love go with you. Shalom.